here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Well, you know, I've always wanted to be played in by the SNL band, so thank you very much for making that happen. Internet and YouTube, I hope you don't flag me for that. But here we are. It's the Saturday Sit Down. I am Alexander Garrett. And tonight on this Saturday feature, we're going to have someone who was first a New York Post exclusive. Yes, sirree, Bob, I kid you not. A New York Post exclusive talking about a poker ring with Tobey Maguire, Leonardo DiCaprio, and so many more. You don't want to miss this conversation I have next with Houston Curtis, who talks about his Hollywood adventures with Tobey Maguire, etc. Today's Saturday Sit Down is probably going to be one of the most adventurous ones I've had. For instance, have you ever been to a poker table with Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man? Have you ever been to a table with Leonardo DiCaprio? How about a multitude of Hollywood celebrities? I haven't, but my next guest has. Houston Curtis, wow, you have quite a story and you put it in a book. Welcome inside.
Alex, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. How you doing today?
Where's your story and why did you want to write this book?
Well, the first time I was approached to write the book, I was offered a lot of money to write it, and in hindsight, maybe I should have taken it, but I was still too close to it. There was a lot of devastation that happened in my life on the heels of the game, and then when Molly started calling me and picking my brain for like all the hands that were in the game, and she was trying to use them in her book and in the movie, I really thought she was going to tell a different story. And when it came out, to see how different, not that Sorkin didn't make a great movie, because it was an entertaining film, it's just not the truth. So I wrote this book.
Let me get backstory. So Molly Bloom has been a movie, and you've noted the characters that have played such and such. I mean, let's be honest, Michael Cera playing Toby is a perfect match, isn't it? I mean, it's just one of a kind. But you see this movie. Uh-huh.
I was good friends with Toby, so maybe I was too close to him to see that. Toby's a hell of a guy. I feel like he's really ran through the ringer on this.
When these games became too much, what was your breaking point?
The games got really high. There was nights when we were playing up to 1,000, 2,000 blinds, millions of dollars on the table, between everyone sitting at the table. I had a really bad night where I lost $1 million to Rick Solomon, the guy from the One Night in Paris video. Rick.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you've seen the video. And Toby called me on the way home, and he's like, "I just want to make sure you're not driving off a cliff." And it was my wife's birthday that night. I was supposed to take her out to eat with my daughters, Chloe and Callie, and a bunch of family. And she had been at the Beverly Hills Hotel having brunch with Toby's wife. And, they all get the news, and she comes home, and my little daughter, Chloe, comes running into my arms, "Daddy, Daddy." And I just burst into tears. $1 million at the same time that the market crashed. The same time that my core business in television and film and direct-to-video, I was getting stiffed from major distributors. It all came at once, and it was, it was really hard to, even cope at that point in my life.
Right. This is all happening, and then you have this big loss. What got you through? Would you say faith by chance would get you through that big loss and through the times after?
See, after the loss, what happened was, I probably won $15 million in the game over the 5 years that we played, but I had invested. I was the one guy that was singing for my supper, so to speak. I was investing that money into my company. A lot of these guys were done. They had made as much money as they ever needed to make, and
right.
They were never going to run out. That was the whole point of the game. To find guys who are never going to run out of money and never going to get any good playing at poker. So yet I was still like a normal guy, so to speak. So I went to Toby and we made a deal. We actually scratched it out on a piece of paper.
Okay.
That he would help float me that million or the majority of it. And I would pay him back with 50% of my wins. And then after he was paid back, I proposed that I give him 10% of my wins with no exposure to my losses for like a year. He said, no, he said, I'll take 50% of your wins with no exposure for a year.
Wow.
So what that meant was,
What exactly is exposure? Even watching the movie, I didn't understand that.
What it means is, if I win $100,000 on Tuesday, I give Toby 50. If I win $100,000 on Thursday, I give Toby 50. Next Tuesday rolls around. If I lose $100,000, I cover it all. Toby has no exposure to my loss, so I'm now even, and he's up $100,000. So the win rate has to be really high to sustain a deal like that. And our win rates were very high. He knew I could pull it off, but I was going to have to play
hours
if
on
you
end.
play that good, you get kicked out of the game in most cases. I had to dump a few along the way just to make it look good. But I won what a lot of people don't know is I won the million back in like 3 or 4 weeks. But it was everything that happened on the heels of that. Everything that was changing in the market, and now I had to carry this big deal with Toby that was almost insurmountable, and my house gets foreclosed on, my family, I had 2 kids in private schools. They moved to Boston where they can go to a great school without paying an arm and a leg, and then I end up, after pitching a TV show, I was in D.C., I think, pitching to the Discovery Channel. I'm just walking from my hotel to the Discovery Channel. I felt like I'd ran a marathon. And I'm like, what's going on with me? And I got home, and that night I kept waking up gasping for air, and I went to the emergency room, and they ran all these tests, and they couldn't quite figure it out, but they wanted to do this biopsy on my chest, and when they were doing it, I went into cardiac arrest, and I died on the table.
My goodness.
Comes out of it. So I wake up in ICU. I was in ICU for like 3 weeks, and I thought I was gonna go in and go out. And I had an enlarged heart and cardiomyopathy, heart disease, and they ended up telling me a year later, after trying to fix it with medicine, the doctor sat me down and told me that I needed to get my affairs in order. That I had like 5 years.
Right.
And when I heard that, I spiraled into, really hardcore depression. And I went back to Illinois, and I started writing this book. And I start writing the book. I start remembering the life that I had and remembering how I got it, which a lot of those stories are in the book, not just being in the big game, but how I made it to that point. And changed my medicine around. And one day I got a call, and I go into the doctor's office, and he's like, I don't know how this happened, but it looks like we beat it. I said, what do you mean we beat it? You told me it was unbeatable. He said, your heart is functioning just as good as mine is based on these tests they did. So, I figure I still got a few hands to play.
When you were starting to write the book, who did you write it for? Was it for you? Was it for us, the reader, to say, hey, don't let this happen to you? What was your motivation?
Well, I've always had like a romantic feeling about the gambling world and the poker world and the allure of it, and I just thought that the story is interesting of a story and a spin that Aaron Sorkin put on Molly's Game. I just thought that the true story would be so much more interesting. And I'm finding from people who've read it, I've been very, it's been very nice getting all these compliments about the book. People who can't put it down. It's kind of a way of cleaning the slate for me,
I got you. Yep.
Toby's never going to go out and clear his own name with Molly, and she calls him a cheap tipper. The guy never gave her a tip less than $1,000 in his life. Okay, where I grew up in the Midwest, if you get $1,000 tip for something for serving drinks at a card game, Yeah,
It's a lot of money.
that'd be a pretty good payday. You know, how does she feel about it? I'm sure she is. You know, I'm sure if she could, she would put a lid on this book and wouldn't want anyone to read it.
Wow. So this is well, are you thinking of a sequel now? I mean, that's what kind of the pitch was. Are you thinking of like another movie to counter that movie?
We've already been in talks with there's some producers and production companies calling us, and agents are calling, and we'll see. You know, I've got a lot of things I want to do. I also am kind of putting my own TV development slate back together, and want to do some really cool stuff in the gaming and gambling arena, in ways, tell some stories that haven't been told in ways that they've not been told before. You know,
I see.
yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to create the next Ancient Aliens for the underworld gambling world. You know,
Okay.
so that's a goal of mine. We'll see what happens. You know, it's becoming starting to be a fun ride again, and if anything, that's what I loved about it most when, you know, I was driving to the Four Seasons or the Beverly Hills Hotel every Tuesday or Thursday night, and getting ready to sit down and play Super High Stakes No Limit Hold'em. It was a fun ride, you know. So I'm always up for a fun ride.
Well, yeah, you were around all these celebrities. Were you starstruck, or did you just see them as people? What was your thought process of them as you were sitting there at the table with them?
That was what was interesting about it. The first time I met Toby at the Commerce, they set me down next to him, and for whatever reason, him and I hit it off. I was already, you know, pretty successful at that point in my life, and him and I ended up knowing a lot of the same people. But I noticed how all of the grinders there at the Commerce, like the guys who made a living playing cards, were really starstruck. And then immediately started recording with me. I thought, man, this could really be good for if I could build a game around, you know. And Toby was noticing the same thing at the same time. So when we got like Leo to come in and, you know, play in the first weeks of the game, that was all part of the allure. You know, some guy will sit down and be willing to lose $100,000 just so he could say he played cards next to Leo DiCaprio.
What's your advice to those suffering from depression after some big loss, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, for me, it was having the courage to seek help. And I was one of those guys who I've been living a very heavy stress, you know, in stressful environments my whole career. You know, like I said, I moved to LA when I was just a kid, and I had no connections or anything. It was hustle, hustle, hustle. And I thought I could take on the world. I thought I could handle anything. And when I couldn't sleep at night and I felt like I had, you know, never having it is one thing, but never having it, then having everything in the world, and then losing it all is another. And it was very difficult for me to cope with. And I finally just went, after I moved back home, you know, I think it was a combination of being back and being out of that LA bubble for a while, where everything was all about LA. And, you know, it was about two things, LA and New York. And if you weren't in the LA or New York, you didn't matter. And it was nice to get out of that for a while and realize there's a whole world going on that I had like forgotten about. And some of the best people I'd ever met in my life were not from LA, and they were not from New York. They were from the heartland, you know. And then I got some help, and you know, started feeling better. You know, that's what I would suggest. Don't be afraid to get help if you're depressed.
Were you behind bars as well with all of this ring, or did you avoid jail time? What was that whole experience with the FBI like?
There was when they were trying to take my house, they're trying to foreclose on my house because I had the $750,000 lien on it from Ruderman, and then the market dip and everything else. I was fighting it and trying to stay in the house as long as I could, using different methods and sneaky attorneys and stuff like that.
Okay.
You know, and the company that had kind of acquired it from the bank they had done the paperwork, but they didn't have it yet until I was officially out. There was some little loopholes that I was playing with. And at that point, I didn't care. I was gutting the place. So I was selling the Wolf Oven. I was selling the Viking Range fridges. You know, Bonnie and the kids are already gone. So it's just me in this big house. And the guy comes up to the door one day with a sheriff. And he says, you know, he starts yelling. And I said, wait a minute. I said, officer, how do you know that my stove just wasn't working and I'm replacing it? And why is this guy standing in my backyard saying he can see me taking stuff out of the house? And the officer said, look, I'm just here because he called me. This is technically a civil matter. I said, so are you going to arrest me? And the officer said, no. I said, great. Then get this guy the hell off my lawn, which he did.
Right.
But then that guy went and he called around and he found out something that I didn't even know. I had a warrant out of Las Vegas over a marker dispute I had with a casino. And it had come on the heels of, you know, the collapse of 2008. Normally, you know, I had $100,000, $200,000 markers all over Las Vegas. So I could walk into any casino and they'd just give me whatever I needed. Wow. And I had a losing session the last time I had been there. And I came back and it's like the world exploded. So it's taken me a little time to figure it out. They're supposed to give me a discount. And I didn't even know that the casino I was dealing with went into some kind of pre-bankruptcy and turned it over to the DA. And
wow,
it just went to warrant. So I'm standing on my balcony the day after I had the cops boost this dude off my yard. And I'm having a conference call with these guys out of New York. And I hear someone say, Mr. Curtis, put your hands up. And you got to realize I live in Sherman Oaks on a street like 2 doors down from Pink, across the street from the creator of Bewitched. Catty corner is Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I mean, it was embarrassing to say the least, but there were 2 undercover cops and they took me in. I was chained to the back of a guy who had a tattoo on the back of his head with a senorita holding 2 Glocks and it said FLAPD on the back of his head. And it was quite an experience. So yeah, I did spend a little, they took me in on a holiday weekend too, on a Thursday. So I couldn't even talk to the judge till Tuesday. And then they wanted all this money. This turns out to be a $100,000 marker that I was supposed to get a discount on. So I ended up paying $80 and it'd be fine. I've now paid $135,000, and the juice that they put on it out of Vegas, they still want like another $40,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so let's get some brighter conversation. What are your favorite memories that you want to tell us today about hanging out with all these people and in the elite poker games and whatnot?
Gosh, there were so many. I remember one time, you remember some of these things almost like it was a movie. We would take a private jet to Las Vegas every now and then. And one thing I really always thought was cool is whenever the jet would go off, like we went with Toby and his girlfriend and a couple of close friends. It was his wife at that point. They all immediately held hands. You know, they'd reach out and hold hands. And it was like a tradition that they'd been flying private for a long time. So it was kind of like their way of praying during takeoff. It's little things like that were kind of neat memories. And when we're walking out of the jet onto the tarmac and Toby turns to me and said, you feeling a little bit like a rock star? I said, yeah, it feels pretty good. So there were a lot of great memories like that. But, you know, taking down a $465,000 night, you know, or a $300,000 night over and over and over again, those are fun. But you tend to remember, and any poker player will tell you this, of all the good fortune you ever have playing the game, you tend to remember the bad beats more than anything else. What I want people to take away from this is live your life with no regrets. You know, if you can learn to live a life with no regrets, then no matter how many highs or how many lows happen to you, you'll be okay in the end.
Well, that's kind of what we're in now, right? We got to just deal with what we're got and don't regret this ever happened. It's just a lockdown, you know? So hopefully we get out of it soon.
You know, there's something good that comes out of everything bad, you know? And I've always just tried to focus on that because there's always going to be bad stuff happen, man. You can't stop it, you know? So try and find the good that comes out of it, and wrap your arms around that for a minute. You know?
Amen. Hey, can we see a quick card trick before I let you go?
Quick one. Well, I tell you what. Next time I'm on, I'll get 2 cameras and put one on the table. But you know, if you're sitting around at the table and you're losing a lot of money, and you see some really slick dude holding the cards,
Right.
you may not always be seeing what you think you're seeing. And that's all I'll do for today.
Very cool. I'm Alexander Garrett. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great Saturday.